let's talk about what particular red flags that someone should be cognizant of when they are talking to a coach that suggests that that particular coach might not be the right match for them.
Yeah, if they start with, if it's an unsafe environment or the coach gets annoyed, if the coach is immediately peppers with a lot of ideas and suggestions out of the gate without doing some digging about what's actually going around. If you say, well, I'm procrastinating on a paper, I'm procrastinating on a work project. Well, all right, have you broken it down into a number of different smaller bits, and are you setting a timer and all that? If they lead with that, I would run away, because that means that coach is going to be nothing but peppering with ideas. And I think procrastination, for example, an experienced coach understands that procrastination is just a placeholder. What is actually getting in the way, so that is keeping them procrastinating? And if we don't get what's actually in the way, and we just say, oh, they're procrastinating, here, let me go to procrastination in my manual, then that's not gonna help anybody. Procrastination could be perfectionism, it could be disinterest, it could be what would some of the other things be? I'm afraid of a negative outcome. Don't think I'm smart enough, or I can't do it. Or it's going to be hard, or it's going to be boring, or I'm not going to know how to do something when I get there to that point, and they never start. So it's much more complicated, or to figure out what it is that's underneath.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if you don't understand what's causing it, you can't really figure out what's the best way to get them out of that and getting them to perform. So
100%. Thomas Leonard, who was considered the father of modern coaching, he said people usually come with problem solution mentality. A lot of new coaches start from that perspective as well. He says, but what it really is that everything that your client is bringing is a symptom. And so our goal as a coach is to help find the source so that you can find the solution. It's not problem solution, it's symptom source solution. I always like that, because that finding the source leads to more exploration and curiosity, and not coming at it with, I know how to fix you, because you don't need to be fixed. We just need to understand.
You know what? You touch on something that's really interesting from a non-ADHD partner perspective. Because we live in the neurotypical world, so frequently, as soon as we hear something, we already diagnose the problem, right? And we already have a solution. And with ADHD, just in general, you got to have curiosity.
100%.
Why is this happening? Because once you understand it, you realize what you thought was the problem. It's something different.
100%.
So that you're not diagnosing the wrong problem.
And that's the ADHD lens, because what it is it sometimes the ADHD brain wants or needs something different than the ADHD person wants. And that then becomes the tension, and that becomes the struggle. And the sad thing is, when people don't understand that struggle, they start thinking they're lazy or stupid or dilettantes or procrastinators or just not motivated or whatever it is. That's not the case at all. I love what I do. I just really love what I do. I could talk about this for hours.
No, that's great. This is great. So let's focus on some advice specifically for both partners, because a lot of times both partners are involved in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So let's cover in general, what advice do you have for an ADHD partner or an ADHD couple who are feeling a little bit overwhelmed and skeptical about coaching? Because coaching is still relatively new and people might not really know about coaching.
Back when I started 23 years ago, they would ask me, would say, what do you do? And I'd say, I'm a coach. And they say, what sport? And so they didn't. Now I don't get that anymore. They understand it. I think it's better, but I think you're right in that there's a misconception of what coaching is, that hopefully some of what we've talked about is going to clear up some of that. I think the advice I would give, and I would give this to both parties, both the non-ADHD spouse and the ADHD spouse, is to approach this with compassion, this whole topic approach it with compassion and approach it with a sense of curiosity. Self-compassion, especially for the person with ADHD, but both of them really, because there's going to be a lot of mistakes and a lot of assumptions as you relearn a language, the language of ADHD, what is actually going on, what's actually happening. And I think that information, that knowledge is going to help the relationship. And the sooner you get that in a relationship, it is my experience, the better, because then some of those well-worn patterns or stories you tell or frustrations that you have, they can start to be unlearned. Because if not, the interpretation of what's behind the ADHD spouse's actions or inactions or attentions or inattentions can be misconstrued as not caring, not being engaged, not, whatever. And I think those are the things we want to avoid. So I would advise both of them to approach the whole process with curiosity and compassion. I think the second thing I would say for the ADHD spouse, take the time that you need to slow down, because there's an old saying that in ADHD coaching, slow down to speed up. So slow down and start the process of actually paying attention to where your attention is going, and slow down and touch base with your spouse so that you know how you're coming across, because a lot of it is a lack of self-awareness. For the non-ADHD spouse, create a safe space where you can have non-judgmental communication, where you can have that kind of interaction that is curious and born of love and compassion. When you're looking for a coach, be real specific, as we've talked about. Be real specific about where they got training and why are they coaches? How did they become a coach? How much do they know about ADHD? All of those things will really help create a kind of a solid foundation. Anything else around why somebody might be skeptical? I think the proof is in the pudding. Your coach should probably have some testimonials. You might even ask to speak to some of the clients that might be willing and talk about their experience. Yeah, I think those are some of the things that I would say. Is that kind of what you were getting at in terms of advice?
Yeah, I think it's great, because a lot of times, at least the couples that I come into play that contact me, a lot of times they really contact me in 3 stages, right? One is they first finally got diagnosed and they are ready to do something about it. But the problem is, while people understand what coaching is, they don't know what they should expect.
No.
And sometimes it is true, the non-ADHD spouse to say, hey, there is coaching. Why don't you try it out? And then the ADHD partner is a little skeptical and overwhelmed because they just got the diagnosis and now they could have to work on it. That creates a lot of challenges around what they should do next, and should they really give coaching a try, because they might or might not have coaching before. So some of the things that what you said really makes sense.
And I would add one thing with that perspective in mind is create a collaborative environment to embrace coaching. So if one spouse has heard about and is gung-ho and says, you should do this, well, as we know from people with ADHD, tell an ADHDer to do one thing, they'll do something, they'll do the opposite. And it's part of it is that self-autonomy. We struggle with agency and autonomy and self-efficacy that we vacillate between just tell me what to do and don't tell me what to do. So be careful of saying you should try this. Create a collaborative environment, an experimental environment where the individual with ADHD has autonomy and can actually go in and dip their toe in and experiment and try it out. Because there is nothing worse in a coaching relationship than having somebody you're talking to who doesn't want to be there. Coaching can't happen in that environment. So buy-in you have to get buy-in from both spouses. It isn't a drop-off service. It isn't a, hey, coach, fix my husband, fix my wife. It's not a drop-off service. It is a collaborative environment. Got to have both people on board, and both people have to be willing to do the work.
So you touch on a really good point, because there are non-ADHD spouses that are so eager to help that they do start to take over the process in some way, unknowingly, that they need to give that space to their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we want to talk about is during the interview or searching for coaches, that process, what advice you want to give to the non-ADHD partners so that the ADHD partner could have buy-in to the process,
Yeah.
and could commit to the process? Because the last thing you really want is, like what you said, is one partner is super gung-ho on the coaching and the other one felt like they have to do it, but it's not really there to want to be coached because they're just trying to appease the other partner.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's the reason that I don't believe that coaches should give advice. It's because when you do that, what is the message you're sending to that other person? I'm going to give you advice because I know better than you. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to do this. So I'm going to tell you what will work for you. First of all, that's incredibly arrogant to think that I know anything that would work for somebody else. And it also robs the individual, even if they get a successful result, it robs them of being able to own that result. And for people with ADHD, because we struggle with self-efficacy because we're not focusing on our strengths, that just compounds a situation where, yet again, we're incapable, we're broken, and it's done unwittingly. It's done from the best of intentions. But my mom used to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so we have to understand what is going on in that situation. I think when you're creating buy-in, I think a person is ready or a person isn't. I find that people understand coaching much better when they've actually taken a taste. It's kind of like going to Costco and having that little pound cake taste that you go, oh, it's so good. And you buy the pound cake. Well, that's kind of what you should be doing with your coaches, is you should be doing a complimentary consult. What I do is as I said earlier, I do a quick chat to make sure they are coaching ready or that coaching is right for them. And then we actually do a teeny short session. I think that is more convincing than anything that the non-ADHD spouse could say to try and convince them. Just give it a taste. If you don't like it, then we don't have to do it. Is that kind of what you were getting at in terms of advice?
Yeah, I think it's great because a lot of times, at least the couples that I come into play that contact me, they finally got diagnosed and they are ready to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, while people understand what coaching is, they don't know what they should expect.
No.
And sometimes it is true, the non-ADHD spouse to say, hey, there is coaching. Why don't you try it out?
Mm-hmm.
And then the ADHD partner is a little skeptical and overwhelmed because they just got the diagnosis and now they could have to work on it. That creates a lot of challenges around what they should do next and should they really give coaching a try, because they might or might not have coaching before. So some of the things that what you said really makes sense.
And I would add one thing with that perspective in mind is create a collaborative environment to embrace coaching. So if one spouse has heard about and is gung-ho and says, you should do this, well, as we know from people with ADHD, tell an ADHDer to do one thing, they'll do something, they'll do the opposite. And it's part of it is that self-autonomy. We're so struggle with agency and autonomy and self-efficacy that we vacillate between just tell me what to do and don't tell me what to do. So be careful of saying you should try this. Create a collaborative environment, an experimental environment where the individual with ADHD has autonomy and can actually go in and dip their toe in and experiment and try it out. Because there is nothing worse in a coaching relationship than having somebody you're talking to who doesn't want to be there. Coaching can't happen in that environment. So buy-in you have to get buy-in from the from both spouses. It isn't a drop-off service. It isn't a, hey, coach, fix my husband, fix my wife. It's not a drop-off service. It is a collaborative environment. Got to have both people on board, and both people have to be willing to do the work.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
I have a new question that I just thought of.
Yes.
A good one to ask, since you're bringing on the fact that you recommend non-ADHD partners to get their own coaching.
When searching for an ADHD coach, should it matter if the coach has ADHD?
Like, there are plenty of really well-trained ADHD coaches, trained well, understand ADHD, that don't have ADHD. There are plenty of ADHD coaches that do coach the non-ADHD spouse because the ADHD spouse needs some support. Here's the thing I would say is, an ADHD coach, if they're well-trained, is first and foremost a really well-trained coach, which means they know how to coach people. They can coach anyone. They also have the ADHD lens, so they can coach the person with ADHD. So what I do with an ADHD client will work for anybody because it's the same structure. It's just I'm listening from the motivational system, the attentional system, from the executive function, the understanding of the different traits, all which exist in the general population. So I think, my bias, I think you can't go wrong either way with an ADHD coach, as long as it's a well-trained ADHD coach, because they will understand it and they can coach somebody with or without ADHD. And in fact, I want to emphasize too that I can't diagnose legally. I'm not able to diagnose. And so I have people who will come to me and saying, I don't know if I have ADHD. Somebody today who says, I was kind of informally diagnosed. Do you think I have ADHD? I said, I have no idea, but I'm going to coach you the same way that I would coach anyone. You've got some of the traits, sure. Does that mean you're diagnosable? Take it up with your doctor, but I'm going to coach you the same way regardless. And so from that point, I'm going to look for your strengths. I'm going to look for what's worked. I'm going to look for what's lighting you up and all of those things. So I think you can't go wrong with a really well-trained ADHD coach. I can tell you this, you can go wrong, unequivocally, you can go wrong with a really great coach who doesn't understand ADHD. I think that's a real problem. You can have a wonderful, masterful coach, but they don't understand ADHD, and they're potentially do damage because they're going to be shocked that this person is not doing what they say they're doing, and they'll brand them as uncoachable. And that is just so unfair to the person with ADHD. And it's nobody's fault, but if you got somebody with ADHD, you've got to understand ADHD.
Yeah, a great point you're making.